Nick Morrison from Safe Streets Halton to the 905 podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And I guess we should just start off with the obvious thing, which is what is Safe Streets Halton, and how did you come into being, and what are you trying to do?
So Safe Streets Halton is a community organization focused on the elimination of all traffic-related deaths and serious injuries, while also promoting sustainable, healthy ways of getting around. We came to being around the provincial election this year, so around March. It was really about noticing that we're talking a lot about housing, we're talking a lot about just health in general, but there's this missing thing. We're not talking enough about the number of people that die on our roads every year. We're not talking about how people feel unsafe just walking out of their front door. And Safe Streets Halton is there to help fill that role and really connect the community on that issue and try and promote some solutions.
I know, very much. Hamilton's been very sort of familiar with this subject. There's a whole spate of deaths in Hamilton early this year that kind of raised awareness that was already pretty high, if we're honest. Halton, I guess, gets more of, deservedly or otherwise, the kind of rap as a more suburban, more car. Well, Hamilton's plenty car centric, but even more car centric kind of community. When you're kind of, I know that this kickback in Hamilton against people who say, it'd be nice if people could go for a walk without getting run down. Have you run into that kind of opposition in Halton yet?
Opposition in terms of like people not.
Yeah, that kind of public resistance that often comes up of anything that challenges kind of a driver's right to drive, if you see what I mean.
Thus far, we have not come upon that opposition. So what we're trying to go for is really a bottom-up kind of work. We're focusing a lot more on community empowerment is a big thing for us. We're, for example, trying to get a tactical urbanism program going with the city of Burlington. Hopefully that expands to the rest of the region. And basically what tactical urbanism is just prototyping. So for people that are afraid of walking down the street, if they don't feel comfortable letting their kids walk to school, this is for those people. So they can say, okay, I want to make an improvement to my street. The city is taking too long to get this done. What can be done? What can I do? So with the city, we're going to be, and talks are still going on, but we're looking to start engagements with the community, get an idea of really what their priorities are, and then take this information to the city after recording some numbers and saying, hey, this is what we found. This is what the community wants. We've worked with them. We've recorded some metrics. We have some goal numbers. Here's our draft plan. What do you think about it? And then we take it from there. And this also does not have to be very expensive. It can be very quickly put up, taken down. It's just like pylons, paint, tape, or even if people have pots, plants, things like that.
The one thing that we've noticed, like we've talked about the idea of, how do we make streets or our city, like the idea of that 15-minute city, right? Everything is within the walking circumference of where you live. You can get to your groceries, your doctors, kind of the essentials of life a bit. But it's something like it's a European centric concept of an urban setting. I guess what kind of sparked your interest in it? Like to kind of bring that European modality or sensibility to, well, I mean, the 905 is very car centric. It was built with the idea of, no, we're going to drive. Everybody's going to leave Toronto and drive everywhere, with their cars and be able to park the cars. I'm just wondering, like, what sparked your drive to see this change and kind of bring this European mentality to the 905 region?
I want to challenge that it's not entirely a European mentality.
Okay.
Like, this is a mentality that we've had before. Urban, you're right that a lot of the 905 was developed around the automobile. There was still some resistance even within the 905. You can look at, once again, talking about Burlington, there was the plans to, I think, put the highway through downtown or something. That there was resistance towards highways and towards automobiles then. The part of it being a European, specifically European sentiment that I want to challenge is that this is a thing, like cities for people is a thing outside of Europe. It's a thing in Asia. It's a thing in Australian cities. Right now, we are just dealing with the remnants of what has been a 100-year pretty much experiment and trying to scale back on that and saying, okay, you know what? This did not work out. We're seeing that more people are dying on our streets still. We were promised certain things that we did not end up getting. And we are seeing that people are actually less healthy and feeling less connected to their neighbors than they did before.
And I mean, obviously the sort of starting point of all this. I mean, I know you didn't use the Vision Zero phrase, but the vision of having zero deaths.
Yes.
Which you can call that Vision Zero, or you can call it just what we should naturally be aiming for. And I know earlier this year I was tweeting something or other, and usually I don't get a whole lot of replies from people who, but quite often I don't get any replies at all to anything. But this one tweet, I said something about the number of people being killed in Hamilton, and it was like it's this kind of really quite extraordinary sort of level of hostility to the idea that you could not have any deaths on the road, and I'll leave you to say the response that I also gave, which is like, where the Vision of Zero kind of concept came from. Well, is it possible to have zero deaths on the road? I'll ask you that question.
The answer is yes. I should have double checked the name of the city that has actually achieved zero deaths and fatalities. Last year, I believe it was actually a US city of all places that did not have any road deaths last year. So it is possible. It's even possible, just the whole point of Vision Zero, having zero fatalities, road deaths, is not just to have like one single solution and then to reach that goal. It's also the pursuit of reaching that goal. It's about making the effort to make our streets safer. So, and we try not to use the term Vision Zero or other terminology like active transportation or things like that, because it's not terms that people generally use in their day-to-day. We're trying to make this as an accessible a group, as a program as possible for people, regardless of what your background is, regardless of where you come from or anything like that.
When you talk about reducing pedestrian fatalities in the 905 or like in Halton, part of it is like just the way that our cities are designed. Our cities were designed for almost 50 years of this basically sprawl. You build a plaza strip mall, and it would have your shops and whatnot in it, and we were all basically supposed to drive to these places to do our shopping and commerce and whatnot. Are you prepared to kind of take on like that mentality of, well, I need my car because I have to drive everywhere to do my shopping, to visit friends, to do the basic necessities of life. I need my car just to get around because that's the way things are. Like,
I think one thing that you need to pick out there, and it's something that we're going to be stressing, is that right now what you're saying is I need and I have to. The whole point is that you shouldn't need and you shouldn't have to. It should be something that you could consider. But if you feel like, oh, I want to ride my bike today, or as I've had conversations with people on the bus or waiting for the bus, we're like, ah, it's a nice day. I'm going to take the bus today. Take my time. I don't have much to do. And sometimes the bus surprisingly ends up being as fast as driving, depending on where you're going. It's when you go to the people who are saying, I need to and I have to, and you're saying to them, oh, we're going to make it harder. You're not, the goal isn't to make it harder for you to do certain things to get around. The goal is to give you more choices, to make it safer, to explore those choices and just live your life. Yeah, at the end of the day.
No, I really like that distinction actually. It's, I mean, like I've been living in Hamilton for the last year, and basically most of the time living without using a car, because I don't need to and I don't have to. Sometimes it's nice if I do. So, you know, if you're going to pick up something big that is too big for the basket of a bike or too big to carry, you know, it's nice to have that option. But yeah, that is exactly the thing, that I can live without a car.
Yeah.
I don't have to live without a car, but I can certainly dramatically reduce the amount of car usage that I've had because of the community I now live in, which exactly has that kind of walkable element to it. But yeah, I mean, of course, it's a community that was built in between the 1880s and the 1930s, I think. You know, so I mean, that's the difference. But yeah, I guess that I really like the way you kind of put that it's like, you know, this is increasing people's choices rather than decreasing them, and I think that's a good point. How much have you sort of got into the fun of dealing with like municipal bureaucracy so far? I mean, you mentioned you're hoping to work with City of Burlington. I mean, you're doing the same with the other councils in Halton region. I'm sure you will be. What kind of reaction have you had so far?
So there have been a few interactions. Let's start with the interactions with the City of Burlington. Staff have been very receptive of everything that we've proposed.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually, the only reason it's moving slower is because they don't have the staffing to actually focus as much on this as they'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking with some of the lead engineers, they're very excited at the option of actually having a tactical urbanism program, informal, mm-hmm. within Burlington. If we take a look at Halton region as a whole, regional council, we delegate to them in July of this year on their transportation reports. We noted a few discrepancies in the reports and made a few recommendations. And from that, it garnered a conversation around how we could possibly improve this report. During council, council also started questioning why we no longer have a committee that's focused on transportation, a citizens committee for that. And then afterwards, we ended up having a meeting with the actual regional staff to understand, okay, where they're at, and to let them know, hey, the transportation master plan is going to be updated next year. We want to be a part of that. We have ideas, and they're more than welcoming of that.
And you know, your membership, you started up earlier this year. I mean, you've done amazingly well, kind of getting awareness in a pretty short amount of time. What is your membership? I mean, can anybody join? Are you kind of looking for more people to join you?
Yeah. So right now, I'd have to take a look. There are a good amount of us. I'd say we're growing very quickly, a lot faster than I thought that we would. So I'm happy about that. We call all of the people within our community just volunteers. So you're volunteering your time to do this. I feel like a member is a higher level of commitment that than most people would be willing to put forward, especially like if you're a parent and you're running around with your kids, you're like, oh, you don't have time to be a member of this thing, but I will watch them. We have people from Halton Hills, Oakville, Burlington, Milton, have people from all over. We have subscribers to our newsletter. We're growing very well. And personally, I'm very happy with the diversity of opinions that we have around the table during our meetings. And right now we're going through some planning for fundraising and programs that we want to put forward next year. And personally, I'm just very excited for where this is going.
But I just want, I don't want to be the the devil's advocate or the negative Nancy here, because I think what you're doing is important. Like we need to rethink these things from and get the grassroots in perspective and involvement at the decision making table by all means. But I'm wondering, the opposition to what you're suggesting is going to be drastic, and most of what I'm coming down to is tying it into the provincial scene, because as something we've talked recently about, and I wanted to bring this up to you, is the Bill 23, the Build More Homes Faster Act, which is really going to talk about, let's call it what it is. It's about increasing sprawl in Ontario. The attention is going to be off of infill, or perhaps better designing our cities and our communities so that we can get around faster and more efficiently and safer, into, well, no, we're just going to keep building out and expanding that need for the car. I'm wondering, like, are you anticipating that fight? Because I don't want to be, again, negative Nancy here, but you're going to get those developers say, well, no, I don't want to build more infill. I want to build that over that plot of land, that farmland, and we'll just build another road or another highway out that way.
So we can agree that yes, sprawl is not the way to go. We need more walkable densities. We need more infill. The growth that we need to see in terms of how we use our land needs to be done responsibly, not just environmentally responsibly, but also fiscally responsibly, because it's been shown time and time again. Even just, you can look at a study from Kingston, Ontario, for example, I believe a year or two ago, that sprawl does not pay for itself. The taxes that car-oriented development just completely focus on automobiles, not on people, on automobiles, does not pay for itself. I think that if we're going to do this, there needs to be things in place to make sure that's done properly. And we're going to be having more of a conversation around this in the future. But right now, our position is just sprawl is not the way to go about this.
Have you, what's the response that you've had from municipal politicians in Halton? What's their reaction when you bring this up of, you're obviously, your organization is anti-sprawl. What happens when you talk to the politicians around the Halton region about this? What's their reaction to that?
There hasn't been any negative reaction really based off of, so just the politicians that we've spoken to, including like some of the candidates as well that should be very connected with their community from the last municipal election. There hasn't been that much pushback in terms of sprawl. And to be honest, our focus has always just been on making the streets safer. And I think because we focus more on that, it's more of a welcoming conversation, to be honest. I think talking about sprawl and land use can get a little bit more complicated. We just haven't had those conversations with any of the politicians outside of Burlington, I'd say, as of yet.
Uh, and I guess uh, the next question I was just wanting to ask is like, what does for anybody who's not sort of familiar with the sorts of things that are used to that can make communities safer for pedestrians. What sort of things are you looking at? And I'm just looking at your website here, and I can see some of the examples, and some of those I'm familiar with from other parts of the world where they're common. But maybe you could take us through them. Is it a matter of just like, okay, we're gonna put speed bumps everywhere, or put or just make impossibly low speed limits on every single road, or is it a bit more nuanced than that?
So yes, there is some nuance to it. It's street dependent. It's dependent on the needs of the residents that live on the street, which is something that we need to focus a lot more on whenever we're doing road widenings or if we're making changes there. It's not just speed bumps everywhere. Like you said, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be, sometimes it might be expensive, but I'll go from cheap to expensive. A cheap change could be just narrowing the lanes. So if there's a certain amount of space that a vehicle needs, that a bus needs, in order to traverse down the street properly at a certain speed, and that's key here. If you make the lanes a little bit smaller, not such that like people are hitting their mirrors, their side mirrors against each other, but just enough that people are realizing it's not safe for me to drive dangerously here. You will see a decrease in speeds, but at what can be, I want to say can be, the more expensive part, but is also the part where I think more people understand the issue, is at intersections where right now, let's talk about Dundas Street, going straight across Oakville, Burlington. If you're in Milton or Halton Hills, you can think of any of the other regional roads, most likely. And crossing the street is not an enjoyable experience. It is a terrifying experience, and you're questioning, can this driver see me? This driver has tinted windows. I cannot tell if this driver can see me. I need to stop here. There's nowhere for me to stop in the middle of the crosswalk. All of this is going through your mind and more while you're just trying to cross the street. It's about making it so you're going to have 4 lanes, 6 lanes, whatever. Make it so it's safe for people to ride the bike or walk to where they need to go. Put a little median in the middle, so that way if people want to cross, a little cross and then check again, or if they don't feel comfortable yet, they can just wait there. It's about, and in doing so, with that specific intersection improvement, you can also open up to improvements in signalization, which is another thing that people, specifically those who drive, talk about, where it does not feel like our traffic signals are smart enough. But if you look up a video from a YouTube channel called Not Just Bikes, he has a whole video just on traffic signalization. And there's a 2-minute clip in his business park video that shows, hey, this traffic signal actually responds to the needs in the moment. It's not pre-programmed. It will let pedestrians cross to the middle island during a signal where cars will not be hitting them, where they don't have to worry about cars, they don't have to worry about transit or anything, or bikes or anything like that. And it's better, overall, the system is just designed better for everyone.
I was just signaling, because something you mentioned a minute or two ago is something I learned in 2018, I ran for council, and I was canvassing on 2 roads that are basically identical, both off Lakeshore Road, Delaware and Seneca. They are, to all intents and purposes, if anyone knows those roads in Burlington, you can hardly tell the difference between them, and they're very close together. But Seneca is about, I don't know, 3 or 4 4 foot wider, no more than that. And that slight extra width makes the traffic completely different on that road to Delaware. And I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes as I was sort of knocking on doors. It's like, oh no, the traffic on this street goes much faster than it does on Delaware. And it's just a matter of a couple of feet. And it's a subconscious psychological thing. I mean, people who drive up and down Delaware don't feel that they're being inconvenienced in any way. So it really subtle things can have quite a big effect. And then the other thing I think, as I was thinking about this the other day, that, you know, a street like Dundas, like Dundas is a vile street. Whether you're a driver or a pedestrian, it is one of the ugliest roads I've ever seen in my life. It's like, how did we allow this to happen? That we can have this, that we think this kind of level of ugliness, of kind of hostility to everybody in its design is normal and acceptable. And I can't help but think that anything that's done to make a street like Dundas more pedestrian friendly or more cyclist friendly is also just going to make it a much nicer place to be. Whereas right now it's really like, who would ever want to be anywhere near that? You know, okay, if you come off, you drive into a plaza or whatever, fine. But it's almost emblematic to me of everything that's gone wrong with urban design, that we have this horrible 6-lane wide traffic, I don't know what to call it, traffic sewer or whatever, that we have right through the middle of a city. And it's like, wow, did we screw up that we created this thing? Right through, you know, the heart of Halton, really. You know, thousands and thousands of people drive that road every day. And it's like, you know, so it's almost like I feel that there's a need for us to start saying, you know, not only do we need to design things better, but we need to kind of think about the aesthetics of things when we're doing it. That, you know, we shouldn't be creating these something that is so kind of manifestly kind of hostile to humans at every level. Anyway, that's not a question. I don't know. If you've got any thoughts on that, please do throw them in.
Yeah, I do want to say that there is, if you look at some of the streets I try not very hard not to bring up European examples, but if we bring up streets in Netherlands, or I guess even some streets in like Montreal or something, the streets that are nice are not nice because they explicitly went out of their, just because they explicitly went out of the way to make it look nice. There are very simple streets that are nice because the traffic moves slower, or because they focus a lot more on the safety of the street. And I think the words you're looking for when you're saying traffic sewer is strode, which is a place that's trying to be for people to just walk along or gather or whatever, and at the same time also trying to be like basically a 400 series highway or equivalent of that.
Yeah, and ultimately it doesn't. You can't do that.
No.
And I really think if we thought more carefully about I mean, maybe this is a kind of elitist way of looking at things, but I do think, you know, in previous generations we did a better job of just, maybe we didn't, maybe it just happened that way. But it seems like, you know, cities used to design themselves without any involvement from anybody other than just evolution, and we designed some pretty amazing cities all around the world. And the more planning we do, the more the more it's sort of blown. Now, I mean, that's very unfair to urban planners. I don't mean it. If there's any urban planners listening, you're wonderful people, I know. But yeah, it's like, boy, have we screwed up sometimes. And you know, to look at a street like that and think, you know, how can this be viewed as anything but a failure on every level? Anyway, Joe.
Yeah, well, you know, we're talking about creating better cities. I'm wondering, like, have you reached out to like neighboring organizations in, say, Peel and Hamilton? Because I'm sure some of our listeners are listening and say, yeah, we'd love to have like livable cities, but I got to drive into Hamilton for work, or I'm driving to Toronto for work. I need that car, or that's great to have, streets that are safer, but the minute I cross into Mississauga, oh, it's a whole other ball game. Those roadways like Dundas goes all the way through the province pretty much. People take it, you can drive it from Halton all the way through Peel region and into downtown Toronto. So, how I guess I'm wondering, like, what, how are you aware of those limitations in terms of your Halton's reach, and what are your plans to address that hiccup?
So we have communicated with other groups in the other municipalities in Hamilton and Peel, and yes, we recognize that Halton is not an island. We are trying to improve our streets here, and we also do need to make sure that, yes, people are able to get to the neighboring municipalities as well, and we're ready to work with them whenever they are. I think so. Right now we're trying harder to take the focus, though, off of having our streets, our roads, be for people that are actually trying to get through Halton region, right? We have people that are driving along Dundas from Mississauga just to get to Waterdown, just to get into Hamilton, and vice versa. And in trying to make it easier for people to do that, to drive that way, we're also taking away from not just the livability of our region, but from our own economy and from the health of the residents that live here and the safety of those people.
It's funny you mentioned that, because personal anecdote time. My wife and I went into Hamilton for dinner on the weekend. We drove, as we're driving in, we noticed one of the structural problems of the downtown in Hamilton is exactly that point. Is the main thoroughfares in Hamilton are designed to get you in and out as quickly as possible. Like, everybody talks about catching the wave in Hamilton, right? You catch the wave and you can just beeline it across town in no seconds flat, and that's great, until you look around the downtown and you're like, there's a hollowing out happening. And why is that? It's because there's no incentive for somebody to stop and say, no, I want to check out that place. I want to stop in there, and I want to see what that shop or that store or that restaurant has to offer. Everything is like, there's no time to actually stop and appreciate the architecture and the flavor of different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And the result has been, Hamilton is struggling to bring back the downtown in a meaningful way. So I find it's interesting that you're a bit proactive on that, in terms of, the Peel, Halton, and Hamilton regions, just these main thoroughfares that are meant to kind of get us in and out of Toronto as quickly as possible, are kind of now where we're structuring our economic and social lives. Like, we're building up neighborhoods around there. So I find that interesting, that parallel that you touched upon there.
Yeah, Hamilton is also something that I was looking at the other day, and I was like, yes, the entire downtown around King Street and Main have been cleared out. A lot of the buildings are falling apart. And when you mentioned how it's because you're focusing more on trying to get through the city, it also does not help that the faster you move, the kind of smaller your view cone gets. You don't focus as much around what's around you. You're focused more on what's ahead of you, because if you hit something that's farther ahead of you, you're in for it, or something else that's farther ahead of you hits you, it's more dangerous. You need to focus more. if you're at a lower speed, if you're at like the 30 or 40 kilometers, for example, that's on Grand Street or most of the downtown areas in Halton, you do actually have the time to appreciate the buildings around you, to appreciate all of the work of the people of the city, residents, staff, and from the people that have come before from a historical perspective.
It's it seems like these ideas are starting to catch serious. I mean, I'm just thinking of the sort of Halton politicians and how they've changed over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, I would say, for instance, Burlington Council, picking at random, or not random in the least, is much more open to this kind of way of thinking than it was a decade or so ago, I would say. However, my experience, well, you know, I'm an old cynical guy, but my experience has been that, you know, the desire to make things change and the ability to make them happen are two very different things. And yeah, you really do need the staff on board at a municipal level to get things to happen. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually one thing that you will be happy to hear is how much staff has been pushing for things like this. It's interesting talking to folks like you who have interacted with just the city of Burlington in the past, and then comparing it to now, and having staff say, no, we're trying to focus more on making our city walkable, making it safe, making it livable. And there's a plan coming to council, I think it's early next year, that's supposed to be coming, called the Integrated Mobility Plan. And that plan will be focusing on pretty much the priorities for certain areas of like, how are we going to focus on people getting through here, or are we going to be focusing on truck traffic getting through here? But at the same time, we are going to make it safe for every single person to get through and use this street regardless. And it's a standard, this specific plan is something that is seen, once again, in like the European countries, where they do these kind of layering of different forms of transportation and then putting them together and seeing how they should or can interact.
Well, I see we're coming up on our time, but I wish you all the very best with this. I mean, I have no doubt that this is the way that cities should be going, and that the benefits that come from thinking in a more pedestrian-centric way affect everybody, you know, regardless of how you get around. You know, a pedestrian-friendly city is a city that's friendly to everybody, I think. So I wish you we both, I'm sure, wish you all the very best with it, and all the success with Safe Streets Halton and safestreetshalton.ca. Anybody listening who'd like to get involved. And thanks, Nick, for joining us today. I'm sure we'll speak to you again in the future.
Thanks for having us.